Welcome to the third video from the Protestant Crusader. This video will briefly cover the Battle of Lepanto and why it is important for Protestants to understand and remember this battle. So this month, October 2025, it marks 554 years since the Battle of Lepanto. The Battle of Lepanto was fought on October 7th, and this battle is a key moment in Western civilization, and unfortunately, it is an event that not many people remember anymore. It was the last major battle that involved rowed galleys, and this battle was the largest naval battle since antiquity. So the background is Western Christendom has received several brutal maulings from the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, as they relentlessly sought to control the Mediterranean Sea and to increase their foothold in Europe. So in 1453, the Ottoman Turks under Mehmed II, also known as the Great, had conquered Constantinople. They had made several pushes into Eastern Europe. There were some great heroes that stood up to the Ottomans. We had Skanderbeg, we had Vlad, known as the Impaler, and we had John Hunyadi. They were able to get some reprieve, but the Ottomans kept pushing. We will see later in the year 1683, as they will fail to take Vienna. But here we are in the 16th century, and we have this massive naval battle. So how was it fought? Well, a Holy League was called. A Holy League is a crusade, so to speak. It's not generally considered a crusade, but for all intents and purposes, whenever a Holy League was called, it was basically a crusade. So this Holy League was a patchwork of countries and principalities that brought a naval force to bear against the Ottoman Empire. So this Holy League was led by Don Juan or Don John of Austria. The Holy League, they decisively defeated a much larger Ottoman fleet. This battle gave the West desperate breathing room in the Mediterranean and delivered a much needed psychological victory. So a lot of scholars have argued whether the Battle of Lepanto is as decisive as many people say it is. Many say that the Battle of Lepanto didn't really change the Mediterranean that much. That is debatable. It's still debated by a lot of historians. But regardless of whether you take the Battle of Lepanto as being decisive from a tactical or strategic advantage or not, there's one thing is clear. The Ottoman Turks, ever since they had taken Constantinople, even though they had lost some minor battles and whatnot, they still had been a rolling force. It still looked as if they kept continuing their progress, they were eventually going to take all of Europe. So this big Battle of Lepanto, it served as being this huge psychological victory. It was massive for Western Christian morale. So in that sense, it was very decisive because it showed that the Ottoman Turks could be beat. And I'd already mentioned 683. This battle paved the way for 1683, when another Holy League smashed the Ottomans at Vienna. This battle had the infamous charge of the winged hussars, and where we saw the Battle of Lepanto was the largest naval battle since antiquity. The Siege of Vienna saw the largest cavalry charge in history. So, like I said, the Battle of Lepanto, it paved the way for the victory at the Siege of Vienna, which relegated the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, to the role of the sick man of Europe. So the Battle of Lepanto was widely celebrated all throughout Europe. And it was celebrated as the Feast of Our Lady of Victory. There's a another name for the Catholic holiday right now. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but that name has changed throughout the years. So the art that you're seeing in this video as I'm talking, it portrays, at least a lot of the art portrays lots of Christian imagery. This both reflects the highly intense religious atmosphere of the time, and that Europe literally saw this victory as an act of God's salvation against the dreaded Ottoman Empire. So, why should we as Protestants care about the Battle of Lepanto? The Battle of Lepanto was it was a holy league of Catholic soldiers, Catholic militaries. However, regardless of that, we as Protestants should celebrate the Battle of Lepanto not as a Catholic feast day, but as a victory for all of Christendom. So, though the fleets flew different banners, they fought for the same Savior. Their courage on the waves preserved a Christian empire. I'm sorry, not empire, Christian Europe. Hopefully that will not get clipped into a short. We'll find out. So this Christian Europe ensured the Protestant Reformation, still young and fragile, could survive in a world not yet swallowed by the crescent moon of the Ottomans. Let me repeat that. So even though Martin Luther and the Reformation were already occurring, it was still very nascent. It was fragile. And that fragility was exacerbated by the constant incursions of the Ottoman Empire. One of the big contentions, the thesis of my channel, is how Catholicism has helped preserve Christendom, helped bring the gospel to us today. That without the efforts of the Catholic military orders, then we wouldn't have had a Protestant Reformation. And the Battle of Lepanto is another example of that. So the men who fought at Lepanto remind us that our faith has always required courage. That sometimes defending truth and freedom means standing against the tide of evil, or in this case, Islam, which we'll save that video for another time. So the victory at Lepanto, it doesn't just belong to Catholics, but to all who call upon the name of Christ and cherish this Western civilization that our faith has built and which is currently under attack. So as Protestants, as I said in my first video, as you'll see in my description, we need to remember these victories. We need to remember what our ancestors accomplished. We don't need to look at Christian history if we're a Protestant as Old Testament to New Testament, and then a couple of cool little figures here and there, this big, dark age of Christianity, and then boom, a big bang emerges with Martin Luther and the Reformation. So the Reformation didn't happen until the 16th century. Jesus Christ died and resurrected in the first century. There wasn't 1,500 years of no Christianity, with the exceptions of a few Catholic heroes and scholars that we give credence to or kind of argue that weren't truly Catholics. No, we had 1,500 unbroken years of Christians. Maybe of Christians that we did not agree with at all times. It may not have been Christians that were theologically on the same page as us, but they were Christians who stood up for Christianity, that stood up for the West. And if it wasn't for these sacrifices, like Don Juan and his men at Lepanto, then I would not be making this video. We would not be able to have these arguments. While I'm a firm believer in the Protestant Reformation, I believe is a very good thing, as I am a Protestant. If it wasn't for the Battle of Lepanto, if it wasn't for the Crusades, it wasn't for the Siege of Vienna, if it wasn't for all these other acts that were started by the Catholic Church, then the Protestant faith would not have had the fertile and strong soil in which it was planted.